accept that your journey is going to be one that takes a lifetime to develop. And, we're lucky that we've had the benefits of a rich life, but just because we've got to where we are, it doesn't mean you have to immediately jump there.
Like many of you in this room, I actually hadn't heard the name Helen Szoke before Dirrum planning began last year. As I'm hoping to pursue a career in international relations and development after school, Helen was an excellent suggested speaker by a friend of mine. I have since discovered it is easiest to sum up Helen as an amazing human being. Her achievements span broad and wide, but I shall limit my fangirling for the benefit of the audience. In 2011, Helen assumed the role of Federal Race Discrimination Commissioner with the Australian Human Rights Commission, in which she oversaw the launch of Australia's first national anti-racism strategy and the accompanying public awareness campaign, Racism, It Stops With Me. Assuming the position of Chief Executive of Oxfam Australia from 2013 to 2019, Helen directly impacted the lives of more than 10 million people through her advocacy for foreign aid, international development, human rights, gender and race equality. In 2018, Helen was awarded an Order of Australia for her distinguished service to social justice through her roles with human rights, anti-discrimination and equal opportunity organisations, to health sector policy development and to the disadvantaged. Helen also led the review into sexual harassment in Victorian Courts. She was the inaugural chair of You Matter, an independent charity supporting women who were relocated following domestic violence. But what does she do now, I hear you ask? She is currently a non-executive director sitting on the Council of the University of Melbourne, the Board of Life Without Barriers, co-chair of Collingwood Expert Advisory Group on Anti-Racism, advisory committee member of the Climate Project at Griffith University, member of the expert panel to Indigenous Business Australia, and is an independent member of the Judicial Council of Victoria. On top of all that, she is a parent, step-parent, and grandparent to 8 children and 7 grandchildren with her husband, Jonathan. So we know one thing she doesn't do is sleep. So as I was saying, a pretty amazing human being. It is clear that through her career, she has helped those who needed stepping stones in her dedication to seeking social justice and commitment to enforcing human rights globally. So without further ado, my role model, live from Melbourne, Helen Szoke.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction. And I do feel like saying hello to the free world out there. We're in lockdown number 6, and I think we're learning how to do this now. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, and pay respects to elders past and present. And I've spent the last couple of hours just listening in on your conference, so I really do feel rather humbled to be part of this. I do want to say that I had a very brief opportunity to do some work on one of Andrew Colvin's committees when he was the Australian Federal Police Commissioner. And when he retired from the role, I thought, oh, that's great. He's going to recapture his life. And then he took on his current role. So kudos to you, Andrew. You're a wonderful man. And thank goodness you're still giving service to the Australian community. But if you want to get some career advice on de-stressing your life, give me a ring. You're an amazing human being. So what I wanted to do today was just to talk a little bit about the journey that I've been on, but there are a couple of caveats with it. The first was that I'm 66 and I feel like I'm still impatient and I'm still learning. And so when we talk about these life experiences, particularly for young people in the room, I want to say just accept that your journey is going to be one that takes a lifetime to develop. And, we're lucky that we've had the benefits of a rich life, but just because we've got to where we are, it doesn't mean you have to immediately jump there. The second is that these are my experiences and everyone's going to make their own story and to make their own journey. So without further ado, let me take you on my little journey. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is to know who you are. And I often reflect that when I took on the role at Oxfam, I was 59 years old, and that was the first time in my life that I actually felt comfortable within an organisation where I felt confident that I could make a difference and to make a contribution. And some of the faded background photos give you a little bit of the flavour of what that meant. I found an organisation that was challenging, that took on a role to really address, I guess, the systemic challenges that exist in society, that was consistent with my own values, which were about being ethical, about being fearless, and about trying to change for the better, but which was also full of young people who were challenging, who were outrageous, who were committed, and who felt very privileged to be doing those jobs. So the photo of the team at Oxfam gives you a sense of what the energy was. That was taken on an International Women's Day. And the other photo, which is deliberately in the background, is the Oxfam Christmas party, where I had to leap out of a flash mob wearing a blonde wig. And I have to say that was probably the highlight of my life. But I think that message about knowing who you are and working on that and not trying to be someone else has been really important for me as I've gone on my journey. The second is to trust in the communities that you're working with. And I've had a terrific experience over the years. That my first job was working in the old Olympic Village in Melbourne, in the community of West Heidelberg, which in those days was white, poor, working class people. And I really learnt the lesson in the 1970s and 80s that people know what the solutions are to their lives. What they want to do is to have you work with them to figure out how you can enable that. And that message has stayed with me for all of my working life, whether I've worked in consumer health, whether I've worked in the different human rights positions that I've had the privilege of working with. If you listen to what's happened this week around Close the Gap and the fact that Aboriginal controlled organisations are saying we know what we need, let us do the work, it was certainly true for the work in Oxfam. And Oxfam gave me like a speed date with the world, where I think I visited over 30 different countries in 7 years and spoke to communities about what their needs were. So I think that the second lesson for me is listen to the people that you're working with. Don't come with a recipe or with a solution, but actually say, actively listen to what they're talking about and how they want to proceed with things. And I think these messages are consistent with the other incredible speakers that you've had at your conference tonight. The third is to take time out to reflect. And again, I've got the benefit of hindsight, but one photo was taken in about 1975 in Hanging Rock, where I was still a university student and wondering what I was going to do with the world. And then the other photo was taken on my first field trip to Sri Lanka, where I went to the east coast of Sri Lanka to see the work that was still being done to try to build up the communities that had been impacted by the 2006 tsunami. But the reflection time is really important, because you need your own moral radar, but you need to have time to think and to breathe. And people do that in different ways. Some people do it through exercise. Some people do it through further studies. Some people do it by consulting with their family and friends. Family can be your harshest critics, but also your most important advice, because they're fearless. And some people do it by engaging in a whole range of different activities. But that reflection time of thinking and thinking about what your outcomes are means also that you'll be open to new possibilities and new ways of doing things and new ways to having an impact. And I think the really critical thing is that change isn't a straight line. Change is often a zigzag, and often your own life trajectory might be a zigzag. So don't kind of set a plan and be disappointed if that's not what immediately eventuates in your own life. Then the next a really important point for me is it's not just what you do, but it's how you do it. And I don't know whether any of you have had the opportunity to read Sand Talk by Tyson Younger Porter. It's not an easy read. I have to do it in little bite-sized pieces. Tyson really got pretty sick of everyone talking about the right way to do things, and particularly imposing those views on Indigenous communities across Australia. And he, in this book, is really, if I don't verbalise him, he's really trying to say, well, I'm going to give you my experience of trying to think about things in a First Nations people's way, and to think about things in the Indigenous way. And it's about being inclusive and porous and open and circular rather than transactional and linear. So this quote really resonated with me. And again, I think it's really important for thinking about how we work in the world in whatever we're doing, whether it's part of a sports club, whether it's in the work we're doing, whether it's part of the school community that we're in. So solutions to complex problems take many dissimilar minds and points of view to design. So we have to do that together, linking up with as many other us as we can to form networks of dynamic interaction. And if you think about the uncomfortableness that Andrew just talked about, you think about all of the research and work that we're doing on diversity and points of view and how that's important to challenge us and to really try to get us to think differently. I think that's a really critical point. I'm going to echo some of what Andrew said. Leadership is uncomfortable, but I think just going through life, we also need to challenge ourselves. And I think about this in the context of, what's the comfort zone and how do we extend ourselves a little bit in that regard. For me, I was kind of in a funny, counterintuitive way. I was lucky when I was at school because I was the skinny, ugly kid with the frizzy hair who was always on the outer. So I had to learn different ways of actually how you interact and how you connect with communities and with societies. And there were some tough lessons, but what it taught me, I guess, was never to close off options. So when I was 28, I became a local city councillor in the city of Preston, as it was in those days in Melbourne. I was chosen to stand for council because it was a ward that was unwinnable. I was a single woman with a WOG name at a time where not many women were in politics. And it, there was never any consideration that I'd be able to win the seat. I got white line fever, I have to tell you, and it was a cliffhanger and I won by 14 votes. But it was a terrific lesson for me that, if you're going to commit to something like that, don't feel comfortable about it, but figure out how you're going to get to where you go. On the other side is some scenes from Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines in about 2013, I think it was. And I'd gone over there for Oxfam to talk about the work that was being done to help the communities in the Philippines after the typhoon hit. And I decided that I would take a lift in the Australian Hercules to go to Tacloban, which had been most adversely impacted. And it was horrific. It was like a tsunami. They were still picking up bodies in the street. There were many people who'd been killed when they had gone into the sanctuary of a sporting ground. And then I actually chose to wait to get the American Hercules back to Cebu where we were headquartered because I wanted to make the most of the time there. But again, it was about saying, how do you just get out of your comfort zone to actually see what the real story is, and then how do you translate and figure that out to share with other people? So I feel very lucky to have had that experience, although I have to tell you that the American Hercules was a much easier ride than, the Australian Hercules was a much easier ride than the American Hercules, which was just like herding cattle into the back of a plane. But incredible, and the Philippines still is dealing with the aftermaths of the wreckage that cyclone occurred. The thing I want to finish with is very much about how do we go to the values that we want to live. And I don't know whether any of you, I'm sure many of you have read Tara June Winch's book, The Yield. And when I read the book and I read this definition of respect, I felt that it spoke so deeply and so clearly to the mutuality of respect, to the sharing of power, and to the the basic humanness of what we're trying to achieve in society, no matter what we're trying to do, whether we're trying to deal with climate change, or whether we're trying to deal with inequality, or whether we're trying to deal with violence against women, that somehow this description of respect in Indigenous language really captured that moment. And it meant so much that I actually sought the permission of the author to use this at the front of the review of sexual harassment into the Victorian Courts that I conducted last year, because I thought it spoke to the fact that until we understand that people wield power in different ways, and often that power is not wielded in a way that's respectful, that is acknowledging, that is sharing, then we're never going to deal with some of the fundamental challenges that exist in the society and in the community at the moment. The challenges around violence, the challenges around how women are treated, how people of different sexual orientations are treated, the kind of challenges that we all want to make do to actually live in a better way, in a better community. So it's a beautiful definition. It's an incredibly powerful read in terms of the whole book. But that's what I wanted to leave you with tonight. That's all I'm going to talk about. So my 6 little homilies from the journey that I've been on. I just want to congratulate again the conveners of the festival. It looks like it's been an incredible couple of nights. Sorry that we can't join in person. We really hope people get vaccinated and we can open up not only the world but Australia again. Best wishes to all of you, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of your event tonight. Thank you.